The point is, you're talking about less Islam. That is Muslim people.
No. Just bear with me, because I know better than you what I think.
I mean, he was sneering in a very self-satisfied way with a extreme arrogance.
This man is an extremist, in my view, and the Overton window, which we talked about earlier, has shifted so significantly that, and I don't criticise Newsnight for doing it, that he has been given an 8-minute interview on prime BBC television, and that is concerning.
Breaking right now, an extraordinary example of egregious bias at the British Bashing Corporation, which hosted Douglas Murray, the brilliant author, the brilliant columnist, a man who is prepared to spit truths about the disastrous state of the United Kingdom and about the ways that Islam is going to potentially destroy our country. And I think they dealt with this in a way that was just so shocking. So I'm going to take you through it all. First up, this is the interview itself between Douglas Murray and Nicholas Watt, the Newsnight political editor. We'll get reaction from my superstar panel, Connor Tomlinson and Father Phil Harris, in just one moment. But first, watch this.
Because of that threat of Islamic extremism, we should have less Islam in this country. Was that a wise phrase, talking about less Islam?
Well, I think it's perfectly wise phrase, perfectly open to misrepresentation. I think I said it at the encouragement of the BBC.
Well, I'm reading your article.
It was
you
on the
wrote
BBC.
In the Sun.
It was on the BBC, that's why.
I'm quoting what you said in the Sun, less Islam. Surely less Islam means less people of the Muslim faith. That means less Sajid Javids, less Sadiq Khans.
Well, that
it
depends.
means anyone who's a Muslim. That's what it means, isn't it? Isn't that provocative?
I mean, it would also mean less people like the Abaidi family, wouldn't it?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, exactly.
So the point is, you're talking about less Islam. That is Muslim people.
No. Just bear with me, because I know better than you what I think. This country has had a wildly stupid and lax immigration policy for decades. And we allowed people like the Abaidi family, a family of jihadists who'd fallen out with Colonel Gaddafi because they were from rival jihadist groups. When the Abaidi family fell out with Colonel Gaddafi, they came first to London and then to Manchester. And one of the sons they gave this country was Salman Abaidi, who at the age of 22 killed 22 young girls at the Manchester Arena in a suicide bomb. One, by the way, for every year of life this country gave him. His brothers just stabbed and thrown boiling oil at 3 prison wards. Let me bear with you. Why were the Abaidi? Hang on. Why were the Abaidi family in the UK? Why is nobody interested in asking that? And I'll tell you what the problem here is. There are lots of types of extremism. You get far-right extremism, far-left extremism. When it comes to jihadist extremism, jihadism comes from Islam. Therefore, if it's 1%, 5%, 15% of people of the Muslim faith who follow that version of it, you've got a hell of a problem. And
I mean, what an incredible interview. What a fascinating discussion. But here's the issue with the British Bashing Corporation. Who do they line up to respond? Two of the most unhinged nutters on the left you could possibly choose. The first is a woman who I am shocked anyone gives a damn what she has to say. The former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Jo Swinson, who was so unsuccessful in her bid to become Prime Minister, she actually lost her seat. She was up first.
Joe, I mean, you'll presumably agree with Douglas Murray that there is a problem with Islamic extremism. We all want to combat that. But what did you think of what he had to say about less Islam?
Well, I think you were charitable in saying that he was talking to you earlier. I mean, he was sneering in a very self-satisfied way with a extreme arrogance. I think, frankly, his contribution there was actually about sowing division, about trying to pit groups of people against each other. There is no contradiction, nor should anyone say that there is, between being appalled at the acts of October the 7th, of the atrocities that Hamas carried out, and also being appalled at the violence meted out to children in Gaza hospitals. I think most people watching this show would feel appalled and horrified at both of those circumstances. And part of the problem here is when people are told they have to choose a side. Actually, this is about whether or not you're taking the side of division or whether or not you want to have the side of people getting along and living alongside one another in a country, as most people want to do and as mostly happens. And I think, frankly, the message that he is peddling is one of division that is deeply unhealthy.
Jo Swinson, extreme arrogance. I would argue that extreme arrogance was probably telling the British public that you were going to become Prime Minister when you couldn't even win your own seat, rather than talking about the appalling deaths of young British girls at an Ariana Grande concert. But as if that wasn't bad enough, guess who else they chose to respond to Douglas Murray? Someone who is always on GB News now, although I would never give this guy a seat on my GB News show. Hell no was he going to be in the same studio as me. One of the most toxic forces in this country, but also one of the most irrelevant men too, Matthew Stadlen.
Douglas Murray is a man who has said of Humza Yousaf, who was the first minister of Scotland, that he had infiltrated the British political system. Humza Yousaf is someone who was born in Britain, born in Scotland. This man is an extremist, in my view, and the Overton window, which we talked about earlier, has shifted so significantly that, and I don't criticise Newsnight for doing it, that he has been given an 8-minute interview on prime BBC television. And that is concerning because more and more people, it seems to me, share his repulsive views. Imagine, just for a moment, Nick, being one of the millions of British Muslims, law-abiding British Muslims, watching him say those things.
We did question him. Now, let's take a...
I mean, the only extremist on that show is Matthew Stadlen for suggesting that Douglas Murray is an extremist. Stephen Edgington posted on this. BBC Newsnight had Douglas Murray on, then interviewed 3 panellists, all opposed to Murray, and one of the guests complained of BBC bias in favour of extremists like Douglas because they had the temerity to interview him. What a joke the licence fee is. Connor Tomlinson, your reaction?
Yeah, Douglas is a friend and an intellectual hero, and I encourage everyone to read his new book because some of the first-hand accounts he provides from the war in Israel are absolutely chilling. First on Jo Swinson, I mean, this is a woman who couldn't tell the difference between a man and a woman on LBC. So morally speaking, I don't think she can tell the difference between her bum and her belt buckle. So I don't really trust her opinion on anything, frankly. As far as saying there's no law of contradiction between being appalled at the murders and rapes on October the 7th and the death of children in Gaza, well, 75% of British Muslims disagree with you, according to Henry Jackson's Society polling, because they don't believe that Hamas did anything wrong. That's 75%. That's not 1%. That's not 0.1%. That's not a sliver of fringe extremists. That's the overwhelming majority of British Muslims. And that is mainly concentrated, by the way, among second-generation, university-educated Muslim men aged 18 to 24. Now, that means, 1, integration isn't working, and 2, that problem's only going to get worse because last year, the most popular baby name in the country was Mohammed. Obviously, they're not very creative at names, but you get my point. It's going to have a demographic, then democratic momentum. And so these people are supporting a terror group who, sure, you don't need to be Jewish. I have no more connection to Israel than I do Iceland, frankly, but a terror group that blames Britain for the creation of the state of Israel and therefore affords us the exact same collective guilt that they do to the Jews. By the way, if you read the Quran, and an Islamist is just, a Muslim who takes the Quran a bit too seriously. If you try and draw the distinction, you end up in the weird territory of asking, was the Prophet Muhammad an Islamist? Obviously. If you read the Quran and the subsequent hadiths, it says that on Judgment Day, the rocks and the trees will come alive with the spirit of Allah and shout where a Jew is hiding behind them so that you can come and kill them. And that was cited in Hamas's charter. So if you're wondering why it constantly rockets its neighbors, there might be a reason for you. As well, if I may, in Douglas's book, he outlines this very well, so he can tell the story a lot better than I can. But lots of the buildings that are leveled in Gaza at the moment are not just because of indiscriminate airstrikes by Israelis, but because Hamas have embedded themselves in hospitals, schools, and even hidden under grandmothers in wheelchairs to use them as human shields to shoot at the IDF. And the IDF have been using disarming technology to remote detonate weapons caches and booby traps. And it turns out that every second or third house is full of these kinds of booby traps. They're stationing RPGs under children's cribs. So in order to go in and extract hostages, they have to detonate the bombs beforehand. And it just turns out pretty much every house on the block blows up, because that's these kinds of absolute savages. In terms of Matthew Stadlen, I mean, it's hilarious that he feels credible to call himself an extremist, because one, if Ofcom wasn't mandating midwits like him be brought on, he wouldn't be able to earn a living. But Stadlen's views that, you know, cultural differences are entirely arbitrary, that we can have people from other countries and completely incompatible worldviews live side by side and live out John Lennon's Imagine, and that, of course, a man can become a woman, is such a sliver, a blip in history, that hundreds of billions of people that have lived before and after him will see him as an absolute fruitcake. So the idea that he is an arbiter of what is and isn't extreme, laughable. And so I don't know whether or not Stadlen will just say any old lie to ensure that he keeps his TV spot and his proximity to power, or if he genuinely believes it. But the net effect is the same. He's delusional and dangerous.
But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact-checkers who claim to determine which facts are true. And for good reason, given the ongoing debates over free speech, controversies surrounding Brexit, and how Trump and other anti-establishment politicians are portrayed. But I have the solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and manipulative narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. It's been a game changer for a news junkie like me, and you can see it for yourself at ground.news/outspoken. But I want to show you this incredible website and app. The app is amazing, actually, in action. So let's look at that recent landmark decision this week by the UK Supreme Court that ruled women can only be biological adult human females, reversing years of trans extremism. You can see clearly in one place that over 350 sources around the world are covering this story. But Ground News then instantly shows how the story is being covered by the media, broken down by whether the organizations lean left or right. It's called the bias distribution chart, and I love it. If you scroll down, you can see every headline about the story, along with the political bias and ownership of the publication. So we can see quite clearly for ourselves that on the right, the Daily Wire covered the case very accurately with the headline, UK Supreme Court rules trans identifying men are not women. Spiked Online was even more forthright, declaring women exist, get over it. And the Daily Telegraph looked in depth at the disgraced famous faces who declared trans women are women. By stark contrast, the left-wing National said the result was only a victory for gender-critical feminists. And the Canary ran with the clearly ludicrous headline, "Victory for the far right," as Supreme Court rolls back trans women's rights by 2 decades. Far right, try calling JK Rowling that to her face, the Canary. My favourite feature, though, is Ground News' blind spot feed, which services upwards of 20 stories daily that receive the majority of coverage from one side of the political spectrum. If you love the news, like I do, the blind spot feed is the best way to get a balanced perspective on what's happening. So go to ground.news/outspoken or scan the QR code on screen if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble to subscribe today. You can get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use for unlimited access with the code Outspoken. So that's ground.news/outspoken. But now back to the show. He is actually Father Phil. I mean, anyone who is going to appear on the British Bashing Corporation and say that Douglas Murray is an extremist. Plus, didn't you find it so shocking, Phil, that neither Joe Swinson nor Matthew Stadlen gave a damn about the issues that Douglas Murray was talking about, which was Islamists coming into our country and literally blowing up our children? They don't give a damn about that issue.
Of course they don't. And there's a reason why they don't. It's part of, and they're part of the narrative. They're part of the situation we've got ourselves into as a nation. There's no way out of it other than dig down. From their point of view, they've promoted this. I mean, I think it was 2019, Douglas Murray's book, The Madness of the Crowds, and so what we're talking 6 years. He actually predicted what was going to go on in this country, and he's been absolutely right, he could see. Now,
and
I
the
was
strange
actually,
death of Europe as well totally predicted what was ahead.
Absolutely right. Now, for me, and as you know, Dan, I have connections with Israel. I'm a trustee of holy sites in Israel. My godson is actually an IDF soldier and has fought in Gaza and fought in Lebanon. And what Connor has just described is not hearsay; it is absolute reality. And I get so fed up of a narrative that is being peddled. Islam means submission, and I don't think we've had a discussion, but I was actually on BBC's Beyond Belief on the Radio 4 show this week, and I had exactly the same conversations as Douglas had, in terms of the woke guests that were on who are absolutely denying that there's anything wrong with Islam. Now, I have no problem with my Muslim neighbours, and I keep saying that. The reality is that we have a massive problem with Islam because it is about submission. It is about death to Jews. It is about death to Christians. We have 60,000 Christians in Nigeria now that have been killed over numerous years. We have people in this country, and it's like 3 out of 4 people, I think, a statistic that I read recently of Muslims in this country support Hamas and support Gaza and what has happened to the Jewish people. We are in massive trouble, massive trouble, because unless we get a grip of this, and I don't think that we are going to see 10, 15 years out unless we get a grip, because we have radicals in our midst.
Connor, I want to show you what happened when Douglas Murray went on talk for a much more sound interview with Mike Graham.
Now we've got a South London law firm calling themselves a human rights representation, acting for Hamas, they say, which surely I would have thought must be illegal, and trying to get their prescribed status changed by the government.
Yes. Mike, deport, deport, deport. We have no place in this country for people who want to worship death and bring death and celebrate death. We have no place for them. Deport, deport, deport. Get them out.
Connor, a very simple message. It's interesting, isn't it? Do you buy into this idea that it's considered much more palatable when Douglas Murray says this stuff because of his beautiful posh voice?
Well, I think make that man Home Secretary, even though he probably wouldn't take up the job. I can't wait for the days in the Lords, let's put it that way, some services to this country. I think actually a lot of it's not just because he's very eloquent and he has a plummy accent, but because if you notice, the first person to make mass deportations a real issue was Douglas in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th in his trigonometry interview that garnered millions of views within the week. And it's because he said, for those who rip down the posters of missing Jewish children, I want them gone. I want them kicked out of my country. I want them deported. And the open door for the conversation, the necessary conversation about Islam in this country, the lack of assimilation, the contempt that many ethnic enclaves, ethnic and religious enclaves have in this country for the host population, that door was opened, as were many people's eyes, after October the 7th, because it wasn't the most alarming part about October 7th wasn't just the massacres, which were horrific enough. It's that the night the massacres were still happening, the pro-Palestinian groups were planning and had put their permission requests into the Met Police, their marches, to begin celebrating it and criticizing Israel and all of its allies' response to the massacre before it had even occurred. And so this made people realize, it made plenty of liberal Jews, I've spoken to them, realize, oh my God, we're sharing a country with these people that would have my family abused, set ablaze, and laugh about it and film it and post it on Facebook. What the hell is going on here? As far as Joe Swinson and the like just saying, oh, it's just, and the BBC, it's just a problem with a minority of fringe radicals. You know, the Abedi family do not represent the majority of Muslims in this country. By the way, the Abedi family, the British taxpayer, paid for that nail bomb that killed those 22 girls because the Abedi family were using their housing benefits, and the Abedi son was using his student loan at the time. And the Abedi family moved back to Libya a month before the attack and refused to comply with the subsequent inquiry, which is very curious. But as far as the idea that Islamic extremism isn't that much of a problem, let me just read off some stats for you. Islamists are responsible for 94% of all deaths and 88% of all injuries caused in terror attacks since 1999. They're 80% of counter-terror police and 75% of MI5's open caseload and 63% of terrorists in custody. That's despite the official statistics, according to the 2021 census, a little bit out of date, of them being only 6.5% of the population. They're 18% of the prison population on the whole. So if you were to tell me that, you know, a very slim minority of the country was responsible for over 75 to 80% of all terrorists, I might think there might be a problem in that community. And I might think the fact that the community themselves haven't come out on the streets any time that one of the members of their community have blown up girls at a pop concert, do care about the Ummah who are being blown up because they've housed terrorists in their own homes and hospitals after they've murdered and raped thousands of people around the world. If they're prepared to come out on the streets for that, but not for the victims of the rape camps, not for the victims of Manchester Arena, not for the victims of various terror attacks at London Bridge and Westminster Bridge, I think we have a problem with that community. And I think that problem, as Douglas has suggested, should be sorted out.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.